Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This beautiful gentleman right over here is Tim. And today we are going to talk about something that I think that you guys are going to really enjoy. Of course, we are going to hit on the non-compliant nature of the response from Americans to the ATF pistol brace rule. Now, we've been talking about the pistol brace rule across the gun side of the internet for the past 3 months. But now the deadline has passed and the response is nothing short of hilarious. So as we get into this, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, like the video. We'd love to have you turn the notification bell on. We need to spread some freedom, and that is what the Second Legacy is all about, and thank you in advance for your consideration. All right, Tim, before we get into this amazing content, how are you today? How's life?
Doing good, man. You know,
That's good.
Another week, just enjoying the summer. You know, good stuff.
You know, just kind of cruising along. A personal note, does that shirt say made in California? Because I might be a little offended.
No, it's not legal in California.
Boom! All right, see, Second Legacy viewers, I got you. We were concerned, but there's good news. He pulls off the camo and he made it right. So, Tim, the stuff that we're going to talk about right now, I'm so excited because this speaks to something bigger than just a pistol brace rule versus a law and all the legalese. This speaks to the American psyche, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we've seen this before. People not complying with various rules and laws and regulations. States that have passed assault weapons bans and mandatory registration schemes. People, for the most part, just ignored them. So much so, I believe it was Connecticut, that finally said, okay, we're going to extend the deadline and you really should comply. And people still blew it off. Right. And they just didn't know what to do. So they just forgot about it. They just stopped talking about it. Yeah. So this really doesn't surprise me. And I'm glad to see that people, are standing up for their rights and just, taking a look at what ATF is doing and things like that and making the decision to do things the way they want to do them.
Right. And what we're about to walk into, guys, if you are not familiar with this scenario, I'm about to show you the raw numbers of the actual rates of people who did what the ATF wanted versus what they didn't. So without further ado, let's dive into this. So Mr. Producer, could you put up number 8, show them what we're reading from, and everything will be linked in the description box below. But the ATF says 250,000 guns registered under the pistol brace ban. Now, before we go into all the numbers and available estimates of how many braces are actually out there, right off the bat, 250,000 sounds like a lot of people who complied with the new rule. Until you actually get into the actual data points. If you could throw up Mr. 9, Mr. Producer. So on this one, the final rule provided possessors of such firearms the option to comply with the registration requirements of the National Firearms Act. We know all of that. This is the important part. Eric Longnecker, Deputy Chief of the ATF's Public Affairs Division, said as of June 1, the ATF received 255,162 applications for tax-free. Now go to number 10. That number represents just a fraction of the brace guns believed to have been sold in the decades since the ATF first classified a version as outside the scope of the NFA. In the impact assessment for the rule, the ATF estimated that 3 to 7 million devices exist. So ATF said 3 to 7 million. However, the Congressional Research Service puts the number much higher, somewhere between 10 to 40 million. So Tim, this is the most beautiful part. That rate of registration on the max is 0.6%. On the men, it's 8%. So in the best case scenario, they were able to get 8%, and that's on really, really off numbers. I mean, there's more than 3 to 7 million braces in population.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you have 1 million yourself.
Well, no. 1.5 million. But no. But anyway, yeah, so it's also interesting to note that you had these wild variances in numbers, and people within the industry would put that number closer to 10 million, right? 40 million is probably a bit on the high side. But keep in mind, I think where most of the lower numbers come from are the actual guns that were sold as complete packages, pistols that were sold with the braces attached. Yes. Keep in mind, far more braces were sold as individual accessories that were later put on by their owners. So that gets into that muddy water area of nobody can really figure out just how many are out there, but given the fact that these things were on the market for a decade and they were quite popular, everybody was using them. 10 million, I think, is a conservative number. So, yeah, well under 10% compliance. Now, it's also interesting to note that, the scuttlebutt on the internet as it was leading up to this end date, a lot of folks were just looking at this as a free tax stamp. These are guns that they were going to register as SBRs at some point in the future anyway. So the government basically just took that revenue out of its own pocket. Oh, well. But I just think that's really funny. So if you take a look at those numbers, most of those registered firearms were going to be registered on a Form 1 anyway at some point because people had purchased them as pistols to SBR them later. And so really, this is just kind of, it's laughable, the level of compliance, if you will.
Right. No, that's such an excellent point because there's so many different aspects to that, right? Because one of the things, like you mentioned, if you're going to SBR something, but you don't want to do it immediately, throw a brace on there. You're perfectly legal. It's a pistol. And then down the road, when you either have the money or the time, you can do the Form 1s. You can do all the necessary requirements. But if they give you a free tax stamp, hey, all of a sudden, my obligations to do this just got easier. Let's do it. We're going to do it anyway. That's a far cry different than people lining up at the ATF office going, please, sir, check my serial number so I'm okay. That's very, very different. And
just reading the posts on social media, a lot of folks are going out buying braces just so they could get a free tax stamp.
It's
right.
Just,
so people were
like,
what's that?
That sounds like two things. That sounds for like cash for clunkers from the Obama program, that tax break with guns, or excuse me, with cars. That also sounds like gun buybacks, where people will take guns that are worth $0 and they'll get $300 for them.
Yeah, it's like the guy that printed out hundreds of 3D printed lowers that weren't even complete firearms and took them and got $50 for each one of them for like $1's worth of filament and time. It was pretty funny.
That was in New York. That was in New York of all places. I think Letitia James changed the rules of the program just because of that incident. If you guys are looking for something funny, that's a good one to look up.
I love it.
I think you would look that up. I think it was literally gun buyback and 3D printed receivers. It was something like that. You will find it. But it was a lot of money he made on that. That wasn't a little bit. That was like thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And, I have friends that have gone to buybacks and hung out outside and offered more money to people for their firearm than the buyback program. So people have a good time with this stuff. But, it's on a more serious note, what they're doing is obviously wildly unconstitutional.
Oh, yeah.
And so, it's just kind of funny to sit back. Now, guys, we're not giving legal advice. We're not telling you to break the law. We're not lawyers. We're just talking about the news event and just kind of laughing at the silliness that the government continually falls into this trap. Mm-hmm. They create these amnesties. They create these, registration things. They do all this stuff, and people thumb their nose at it. I mean, it's nothing new. This has been going on, forever. And so for them to think that they're going to get some mass compliance is laughable.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, like you could take this down so many roads and apply this, like you said, in the Connecticut situation where they were like, no one complied or listened, and it's better for us to push it back than to lose face. So we're going to save face, and we're going to just move the date. And eventually they dropped it. They're like, never mind. No one's listening to us. It's kind of
and plus, we have the injunctions granted to Gun Owners of America, FPC, and SAF, which covers all of their members nationally as being reported. So you have millions of people that are under this temporary injunction until this is resolved in the courts. So ATF is probably sitting back right now wondering what to do. Now, I'm sure they're going to go out there and chest thump and pat themselves on the back and take a victory lap for their 0.8%. Compliance. But in reality, that's just them pandering to the media. And I guarantee you behind closed doors, they're probably going, oh my goodness, they just, what are we going to do?
That fell flat. Well, it's just like when they do magazine bans. It's just like when they do any of their other cockamamie schemes where it's like, well, like Washington State, for example, you can't have any 30-round magazines. Wait, are you saying you're going to take my property? No, that would be unconstitutional. But you can't have any new ones. Well, how do you know they're new ones or old ones? They are. What?
We're going to take your word for it. Yeah, I wonder if Biden's going to, take some money and hire 87,000 new ATF agents to go along with the 87,000 new IRS agents to try to force their will on the people.
Yeah, they need to hold hands while they do it. Skip down the road while they do it. Yeah, no, I think getting back to to your point, the more serious side of this, I think that they've drastically underestimated, like you said, the actual numbers based off of pre-sold kits or guns that were actually at pistol bracelets. I think that's the way they got that number, 3 to 7 million. But I think you hit the nail on the head. The amount of people aftermarket over a decade, because the AR is so malleable and you can modify it so easily. I mean, man, like
look at all the brace companies that sprung up, and people were making their own braces. There were 3D files out there for 3D printers and stuff that people were making their own braces. There are millions and millions and millions of these things in circulation out there. Yeah. And so if that doesn't classify as common use, I don't know what does.
Oh, yeah, no. That common use thing, that's going to be real fun down the road. At some point in the next probably 3 to 5 years, that common use thing is going to get a real household verbiage, because that's going to be a real important thing as the court systems continue. But man, dude, when I looked at this, just kind of on my own personal thought, I looked at this and said, okay, so best case scenario. And like you said, you're taking all the variables out, leaving all the possibilities like what we're talking about over here to the side. Based off of your numbers that you're providing that are probably incorrect, the best possible outcome that you could have is sub 10%. Sub 10%. The best case scenario off of estimates that, again, not taking into any of the variables, is 0.6. Yeah. I mean, that is, if you look at that in any other lens, if you look at that in business, if you look at that in adoption rate of safety protocols, if you do anything of that nature, that is abysmal. That is so far below acceptable that it's almost, like you said, it's laughable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, looking on the other side, we're talking about 8% on the high end. That's 92% noncompliance.
Exactly.
So that puts it in a little bit better perspective, right? Now, the downside to that, for those that have chosen noncompliance and maintain the brace on their pistol, the downside is they face 10 years in federal prison if they get caught with that. And so it's not a joke. And that's why it's so important that we fight this in the courts and we get a favorable outcome so that people, who bought these things legally, that at one time had the blessing of the ATF, even though they said that they don't really regulate accessories. At one time, this was a perfectly legal item to sell, with letters having been given to a couple of different companies from the ATF saying these are perfectly legal. And then a decade later, they completely shift course and go, turn them in or become a felon. Yep. And that's why we have the court system. And it's so important that you guys get involved in this fight. Join a group like GOA or FPC. Get in the fight. That's the most minimal effort you can contribute to the cause, is just simply joining one of these organizations and helping to fund these court cases so we can get that decision that will keep 92% of the owners out there from facing very serious legal ramifications.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, and so that's something I've had in the back of my mind for a while. I'm glad you brought that up, because, and kind of in closing this episode, it's not like, and I think people have this understanding of, like, the word "you're now a felon," the phrase "you're now a felon" or "felon" has been thrown out a whole lot in this entire ordeal. It is unconstitutional. It is in the law, or excuse me, it is in the judicial system. It is pending litigation. There are sitting injunctions. But at the end of the day, before that gets struck down, there is still the effect of law. It is a rule, but it has the effect and carries the penalties of law. Now, I don't believe that necessarily the ATF is going to, like Tim was doing, being tongue-in-cheek, kind of funny about hiring 87,000 ATF agents. I don't think they're going to hire 87,000 agents and go door to door and say, "You're a felon, you're a felon, you're a felon." I think, or at least this is my opinion, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, these represent much more of a leverage point should anything come down the road against somebody. Does that make sense? Like, for example, I don't think that they're going to go door to door to every single person and say, "Hey, you're a felon, you need to change this, or you're in trouble, or you're busted." I think that, say, for example, "Hey, we had a red flag law case lodged, so we had to look into this, and oh, by the way, you had a felony piece of equipment." You know what I'm saying? It's like a leverage point versus a seizure point. You know what I mean?
Commonly referred to as a tack-on charge.
Yes.
They'll find you, they'll get you on something else and then tack that on when they find it. It's one of those things that, it's the thing I worry about is I'm fairly confident. I don't want to be overly confident, but I'm fairly confident, given the makeup of the district courts these cases are currently in and the current makeup of the Supreme Court and decisions they've made. I'm fairly confident that we can get the proper decision that will undo this ATF, rule. I hope, but I am hopeful. I'm beyond 50% thinking that we're going to get the outcome that we deserve, which would be the constitutional outcome, in essence, undoing the ATF's rule. My question then becomes, because I'm not a lawyer, what about the people that get jammed up by this before the courts strike it down? Are they going to serve their prison sentence, or will they be let out of prison? I mean, this creates so many messes throughout our culture and society, given the prominence of these devices.
Oh, yeah.
Millions and millions of them exist out there. And I guarantee you there are millions of Americans that legally bought their pistols from their local gun store that have don't live on social media. They don't follow the limited news coverage that this has gotten. They just don't know that they're sitting on a 10-year felony prison sentence and they're gun safe.
Right.
And that's the true injustice in all of this, outside of the constitutional problems. People have no idea that they're just one red flag law away, one welfare check away, one anything going to the range with it, getting pulled over by an overzealous police officer. They're just one step away from really serious legal ramifications. And to me, that's just so it turns my stomach.
Yeah, I think that if I were to put where the most vulnerability would lie, I think what we're talking about now with the tack-on charges, with the welfare checks, like you just said, I think that's where the biggest vulnerability lies. Because the reason that we don't have a national registry in this country is for a situation just like this. Like, the reason that you can't have a national database from universal background checks is so they can't go door to door and seize your stuff. I mean, that's why we don't do that. But I think the vulnerability is there, to your point. But that's something to consider. But for right now, that compliant rate, it's not good. It's not a good look.
I don't think that they probably expected much better than that. Maybe they're happy with it. Maybe it's more than they expected.
I wonder what their estimate was. That'd be interesting. Like have some dice, but let's get 20%.
They're probably just standing around in Doodlebug's office there throwing darts going, oh, we got a 5%, I got a 10%, I got a 15%. It's a mess, but he doesn't even know what's going on,
No.
He probably couldn't draw a picture of a brace. Yeah.
From his testimony,
he's not a gun
clearly.
guy.
No, I'm not the firearm expert, but I can get the answer to you. I've got people. What?
Yeah. I'm just here to testify. Don't know anything about guns or the law, but I'm just here, and I head up the organization that regulates this stuff. But I don't know anything about it. But I got good people.
Could you maybe stop writing rules until you learn a little bit?
Right? Anyway, so, yeah, interesting discussion for sure. We'll be following the story to see how this pans out. But hopefully the courts get involved and do the right thing. If you guys would like to be part of our call-in program, there is a link in the video description below. Follow that link, fill out the information. We'll contact you, get you on the show. You can ask your question or just make a statement. We'll have an interesting conversation about whatever 2A issue is of interest to you at that time. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you guys soon.